This is the story of Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there was a poor woodcutter who had 2 children, named Hansel and Gretel. When his first wife died, he remarried. The 4 of them lived in a simple cabin in the middle of the forest. Life was always hard at the woodcutter's house, but at that time things had gotten much worse. There was not enough food for everyone. So, the stepmother, who was very wicked, suggested they give a piece of bread to the children and abandon them in the forest. The woodcutter didn't want to hear about such a cruel plan, but the woman was very clever and persistent and managed to convince him. In the next room, the 2 children had heard everything, and Gretel burst into tears. "Don't cry, I have an idea," reassured her brother. Hansel waited until the parents were asleep and went out of the cabin to search for white stones that glowed in the moonlight. He hid them in his pocket and returned to bed. The next day, at dawn, the stepmother woke the children, saying, "Let's go chop wood in the forest. This bread is for you." The 4 of them set off. The woodcutter and the woman went ahead, the children behind. Every 10 steps, Hansel dropped a white stone on the ground without the parents noticing. While the father and the stepmother were chopping wood, the children were left alone, and there they were abandoned. Since Hansel had marked the path with the stones, the children managed to return home by nightfall. The father was happy to see them again, but the stepmother was not. She sent them to bed and locked the door of the room. Being wicked, she planned to take them even further the next day. The children heard the stepmother's plan again, but this time Hansel couldn't leave the room to pick up the stones because the door was locked. Gretel was desperate and could only cry. "Don't cry, I have an idea," reassured her brother. The next day, before they left, the children were given a piece of stale bread. Instead of eating it, Hansel scattered the breadcrumbs on the ground to mark the way. Once again, the woodcutter and the stepmother abandoned the children in the forest. So Hansel and Gretel began to follow the path marked with breadcrumbs. However, the birds had eaten all the breadcrumbs left along the way. So the children wandered until they came upon a house made of chocolate, cookies, and sweets. Hungry, they ran and started eating. Suddenly, an old lady appeared, inviting them. "Come in, there are many more sweets inside for you." The children ate a lot until they fell asleep. When they slept, the lady, who was actually a wicked witch, imprisoned Hansel in a cage and forced Gretel to cook for him every day. She wanted to devour him when he was fat enough. Every morning, the witch would say to Hansel, "Hansel, give me your finger, I want to feel if you've fattened up." Hansel realized that the witch had poor eyesight, and instead of showing her his finger, he showed her a chicken bone. And she would get furious thinking he wasn't getting fat. Several days passed until the witch, tired of waiting, decided to eat Hansel. she said to Gretel. "Gretel, light the fire and put water to boil. Thin or fat, today I will eat your brother." Terrified, Gretel started to cry. Then the witch lit the oven and said to her, "Go in there and see if the temperature is right to bake bread." The witch intended to close the oven when Gretel was inside, to bake her and eat her too. But Gretel realized her intention and asked, "How do you get into the oven?" The witch replied, "You're a very silly girl. Look and learn." So the witch approached and put her head in the oven. At that moment, Gretel pushed her and she fell inside. The girl quickly locked the oven door and the witch burned to death. Gretel freed her brother Hansel, and the two hugged and cried with joy. With nothing to fear anymore, they explored the witch's house and found chests full of precious stones. They filled their pockets with all the treasures and sweets they could and set off into the forest. After walking for a long time, they began to recognize the path. They walked a little further and saw their father's cabin. The stepmother had died of hunger, and the father was tormented by remorse for having abandoned his children. Seeing them back, the father was overjoyed and hugged them. Then Hansel and Gretel showed him all the treasures and sweets they had in their pockets. And from that day on, the woodcutter and his children lived in abundance, without any worries. Remember to like the video and subscribe to our channel to watch the next videos. Bye!